Hail Mary. Blue great. Hail Mary. Over to the right. Blue great.
Hey sailors, welcome back to another tutorial. This one's going to be Chapter E5 Boats. So we're going to cover everything you need to know about boats, how to use them or not to use them, and shooting from and shooting at boats. So we got a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. In Squad Leader, we have three kinds of boats. So we have our assault boat, which represents two types actually. We have the German powered with an inherent driver for movement point one, and we have the standard two non-powered, non-inherent driver assault boat. We've got our three pneumatic rafts here for a full squad, half squad, and for single leaders, heroes with support weapons, etc. On the back of the three boat counter, you'll see the two. And then lastly, we have large rafts. Now, large rafts are only used to transport ordnance, and the manhandling number has to be a 10 or more. So you're only looking at small caliber ordnance, and therefore AFVs and large caliber will not be transportable by rafts. Again, we're just going to look at boats. We're not looking at landing craft. That'll be a separate one when we do PTO. The contents of a boat are never placed directly on the counter. Much like a parachute counter, your contents are held off board on your Chapter K divider cloaking box, and so the your opponent will never know what boat is carrying what, so they'll just be able to target a boat. Anything that impacts a boat, casualty reduction and all the rest of that stuff, you're not going to be impacted by morale checks and leader loss morale checks if that should happen to you while you're on the boat. Again, you're not going to typically break on the boat. Normally it's casualty reduction. Now if you look at a boat counter, all five of these counters, they all have two white stars under the movement points, which denotes that it's a very small target. In addition to that, if you're in the water, you're typically going to be fired at as a hull down status as well. So you have a +4 against you from 2 hit rolls. Something to remember about water obstacles. All water obstacles are one level beneath the surrounding terrain unless the river is flooded. Now when we get to the next bullet point there, current direction and force, we also have to worry about stream depth. Now there's three types of stream depth you can have, and this is all from Chapter B. You have fordable, which means you can transit through the water without use of boats. You have deep, which is probably going to be your typical result, and you have flooded. Flooded will raise the water level so that it's even with the surrounding ground. Regarding stream current and direction, anytime we have boats, we must have a stream current and direction. There's three kinds you can have, as you can see there: slow, moderate, and heavy. And this is determined if the SSR does not specify. So again, most scenarios with boats will have this specified for you. However, should that not occur, and should you need to roll for design your own purpose, you add your EC modifier to that single die, and it determines what it is. So for this example here, bring in the handy dandy dice tower, and we have a 4. So 4 would be a moderate. If we assume ECs are moderate and there's no modifier, that means we have a stream that's moderate. On the back of the moderate, you'll see the heavy, and again, if it's slow, you don't need to worry about direction because it doesn't impact drift. Moderate will impact drift that on your turn that you're moving your boats in the advanced phase, your boats will drift 1 hex. If it's a heavy current, then your boats will drift 1 hex every turn in the advanced phase. So because I rolled a 4, our current is moderate. Now we also look at that number on the die and we determine if it's even or odd. In this case it's even, which means that the counter stays. So the sequence again would be, you put your counter down, doesn't matter which side is up. You roll your dice, and then you adjust accordingly based on the dice. So regarding manhandling, the way manhandling works is very much like a gun. There's a couple of differences. For one, infantry do not become TI when they're manhandling boats, and you must have at least 1/3 of the boat's portage point capacity in order to move the boat. Anything in excess of that 1/3 can be used for that beneficial -1 for the extra squad on your manhandling die roll. You cannot bypass or go into or out of buildings for large rafts unless it's in a factory and you go through the stairwell location or the where the road enters the factory. There's also a bay door there. However, for non-large rafts, they can use bypass and you can leave and enter buildings. Now, up to 4 assault boats can be towed overland as if a single gun with a manhandling number of 10. So you can have 4 of these on the back of a truck and cart them around to wherever you want. So before we get on to the rest of that, let's talk about manhandling. So in this example, we're gonna have a 4.67 with a dismantled machine gun and an 8.1 liter. They're gonna hang out here, and they're gonna be portaging a boat. In order to move, we must roll our manhandling number, which again, as you can see there, is a manhandling 12. For your information there, the assault boat has a manhandling number of 10, and the large raft has a manhandling number of 8. So again, we have to make our manhandling die roll. So you roll both dice, add any modifiers to it. In this case, we would have a -1 because of the extra squad, and therefore we're able to move 1 hex at a cost of 2 moving factors. Now, something to remember with boats is once they are beached or in the water, they're considered a vehicle. And like mounting a vehicle, it limits you to 4 movement factors in any movement phase when you're mounting, riding, or dismounting from a boat. It generally costs 1 movement factor to load into a boat, but there might be extra cost added if you have to, say, cross a wall, descend from an abrupt elevation change, etc. Any boat is launched into adjacent water obstacle once you've paid that cost. It costs nothing to actually launch the boat. It just costs to get into the boat. And once you're in the boat, any remaining movement factors can be used to power 1/4 of the boat's movement points. Finally, all unbeached boats are in motion. So in this case, again, he's already spent 2 movement factors, which means he only has 2 left if he wants to mount. So they can put this down. They can pay the extra 3rd point to enter the boat. Then they can push off into the water obstacle itself. Now they're considered in motion. However, they do not have enough movement left in order to propel themselves any further. They can only do 1/4 of 2, and you need to have at least 1 movement point to move. So that's where they're going to be stuck at the end of their movement phase. During the advanced phase, boats may not be manhandled. You cannot move with the boat in the advanced phase. However, if the boat is already beached, you're able to enter the boat, no problem, and you can push off into the water. Again, pushing off into the water costs nothing. It's only entrance cost for the boat. So if we were straddled, for example, on this hill hex side, and this unit was here, it would have to pay 2 to descend down to the ground level, then has to descend down to the -1 level for the water level to enter the boat. So 2 factors means he can move 1 movement point left, and then he can move accordingly. Which brings us to beaching. So beaching, as I said, can occur freely during the movement phase or the advanced phase if you declare it as you enter any land and water hex. So for example, if we have a boat here, it's the German movement phase, so he's going to move 1. If he does not declare his intent to beach, then he'll have to do it at this point, and he'll have to pay the extra cost to beach it, which means he only has 2 movement factors left to exit the boat. Now, if we're back here and you declare your intent to beach and move into the hex, you beach the boat for a cost of 1 movement point, and now you can move up 2 and then 3. So it's very important that you declare when you're landing, especially when you're landing, that you're going to unbeach the boat. It goes without saying that you must be beached in order to load and unload, and you can only enter through the beached hex site. So again, for example, if these units are in the building, the boat is beached on the Q8, Q9 hex side. This unit here would have to come down to here, move up to Q9, and then into the boat for a total of 4 movement factors. So they would not have enough to, 3 movement factors. They would not have enough to continue on the way. But they cannot enter in from the side. Only on the hex side that is traversed with your counter. So in this particular case, it could go 1, 2, and then they can move. Or if in this case, again, they have to come out to the Orchard Road, over to the intersection, and then they can come down onto the boat. So just something to remember, you can only enter into the hex side that you're straddling. Again, boats can be unbeached freely when you move into the water hex during the movement phase and advance phase, and you will not be affected by drift on the turn that you unbeach. So even if this was a heavy current and you enter the boat and unbeach it, you're not going to be impacted by the current until your next turn. So in this case, you would move 1 or 2, and then you'd have a heavy current and you'd have to worry about drifting into the downstream hex, which we're going to cover. All beach boats and passengers are at water level, but not on the water. However, all attacks must be able to trace fire to the white center dot. So if these units are in the boat and they have not pushed off, or even if they have, any fire into that hex has to be able to see that dot. So if there was for example, an American unit over here, he would not be able to fire because of that plateau effect. If he was over here, then obviously he'd be able to see and he could fire into that location. Just remember that if you're beached and on the boat, you're not on the water, but all attacks must be traced to that center dot, not the vertices. Last point about beaching then. So if for some reason the boat is unmanned, for example, maybe you were captured in close combat and the boat was unharmed and for whatever reason was let loose to the currents, you're basically going to move randomly based on the current every turn until such time as you come close to a land hex, in which case you would have to make a roll, and if you roll a 1, you actually beach yourself. So the boat would not be beached and would continue down. If I had rolled a 1, then it might be beaching on one of these hex sides, and you just randomize which one it does. So that's if you have an abandoned boat for whatever reason. Obviously, this doesn't apply to the assault boat, the German powered one, because again, it's the inherent driver, so it'll never be unmanned. All right, so let's look at boats in the water. If you have enough men to sufficiently man the boat, you can move up to the maximum of your movement points. Again, in this case, most of them are 2, exception of being the German powered assault boat. So you can move 2 hexes in any which way you want. There's no reversing, there's no vehicle covered arc change. However, if you insufficiently man the boat, you'll be subject to drifting. And the only thing you can do is then beach and unbeach. So if for some reason the SSR or you casually reduce to the point where you only have a half squad, say, that would not be enough to maneuver this boat, they would be subject to drift. So whichever way the current's going, eventually they might be lucky enough to end up over here. So it makes sense to obviously have the required number of people inside the boat. Again, in the advanced phase, this is where drift comes into play. It does not apply on the turn that you first enter the water. However, after that, you'll always be subject to drift depending on the current. So if it's slow, you will not be drifting. If it's moderate, you'll come 1 hex on your turn. And if it's heavy, then it'll be every advanced phase. There's 2 caveats to this. On the first one is if you're non-broken, shocked, or stunned, and or you're in a powered assault boat, you can choose which downstream hex to go to. Obviously, you'll pick the one closer to your objective. However, broken, shocked, stunned, what have you, then the downstream hex is randomized. Boats cannot move through any type of pontoon bridge because it's a series of boats linked with a walkway and therefore it will block any path. And you're always considered in motion when you're in a boat on the water unless it's beached. Now, there's no extra movement points for multiple boats in a water hex. However, if you get shot at, overstacking will apply. So remember that too. You can have 10 boat counters and squads there, but when it comes time to overstacking penalties, you're going to be paying for that. And then lastly, untrained passengers require a die roll in order to start paddling. So again, assume by SSR, your passengers are untrained. You roll a dice, and if it's a 5 or a 6, in this case it's a 6, I'm unable to move, and I'm just subject to the drift of the current. If that had been anything but a 5 or a 6, then I would be able to move the full move of the boat counter. All right, so let's look at firing from a boat. Now, if you are beached, your firepower is cut in half. If you're on the water, because of the motion status, you're actually going to be down to a quarter of your firepower. You cannot prep or opportunity fire when unbeached, and you can only do defensive first fire and advancing fire phases. As well, if you do fire in the advancing fire phase, then your dice will, or your firepower will be halved again. And then you cannot have a multi-boat fire group. You can only have the counters on a single boat acting as a fire group. So, for example, if we have another raft and we have our half squad in there, those two boats would have to fire separately at a target. They cannot combine their shots. Now we come to the scary part, firing at a boat. So we break this down into two types. One is non-ordnance or area target type versus boats in the water. So all non-ordnance, and this includes your OBA, and area target type will versus non-beach boats are resolved on the vehicle kill line. There's no FFMO, FFNAM, and if you're attacking on the area target type, then you're actually going to quarter your resultant firepower. So if the final IFT die roll is less the vehicle kill number, then several boat counters in that location up to the highest number of KIA are sunk. Again, if you're defensive first firing, you can only affect a moving target. So if there's other boats already in that location, you will not be able to impact them if you're defensive first firing. If the final IFT die roll equals the vehicle kill number, only one boat counter is affected, and this is done by random selection. And then finally, passengers share the fate of their boats. So again, if we have a half squad and a squad with the leader, all on their boats, and we get shot at by the 666, enough chaos is caused to equal the kill number. One of these boats would be sunk. So we roll randomly. 1 to 3 will be the leader's boat. So one of these boats is sunk. The way this works, if you're a full squad, is your squad is halved. Pretend that's not there anymore. You must roll to see if your support weapon or your leader, if you have them, survive, in which case you just randomize again. 1 to 3, they'll be alive, and a 4 to 6, they'll be dead, and the black will be the leader. So in this case, the machine gun is gone, but the leader is fine. That's how you suffer casualties on a boat. If, I should have said, this is flipped over as well to the two boat side. Now, say the Sherman fires on the boats with its machine guns, and it causes another casualty reduction, then the boat would be gone, as with the passengers. So a 3-boat counter will be replaced by a 2-boat counter if it suffers casualty reduction of any kind. A 2-boat counter will be eliminated, as will its passengers, if it takes another hit. If for some reason you're still beached on the boat and you take fire, it will be with the full firepower, unless you're firing area target type, which again will be halved on the IFT. When it comes to ordnance fire versus boats, you can only impact one counter at a time. So again, we'll put our handy dandy half squad in with these guys for some reason. And we begin our move. So we move into 1 hex here. This tank now has line of sight, and he's going to attempt to fire. Now, as I said before, firing up boats, you're going to be firing at a hull down target status, which basically means you're going to need a turret hit, effectively. This does not apply if you're an aircraft, obviously, and if your elevation is greater than the range, it will not apply either. So in this case, the tank is on a level 2 hill, which is 3 levels above the waterline, and he's 3 hexes away, so he will be firing at a hull down target. If I move 1 hex closer, I'm now only 2 away, but I'm still 3 up. He'll be able to fire without the hull down status, assuming he can depress his gun enough to cause damage. No heat or ATR can be fired at beach boats or on the water. Again, heat needs something hard to impact against to ignite it. You'll also get a +2 target size die roll modifier again if you're in the water. However, once you're beached, you do not get that target size. You do not get hull down, or you do not get motion status the minute that you're beached. So if you're beached here, for example, nothing else applies, you'll be targeted with an average size target, so you don't have to pay that extra +2 penalty for the very small target. So some last closing points then. When a boat counter is sunk, again, all its passengers are eliminated unless they're beached or in shallow water, which is here defined as fordable river depth. So if your river depth is fordable and you lose your boat, you become fording infantry. You do not get eliminated. Anything else like deep or flooded, you will be eliminated with your boat, unless again you're beached. If you're beached and you undergo an attack, the boat may be destroyed. Again, you're attacking the boat. Now you become infantry at the base level of the hex. You're going to be using that same die roll that destroyed the boat as an IFT die roll to determine what happens to your unboated boys. And you're going to suffer a -2 hazardous movement penalty as well, as long as you remain in that hex. Again, you're at a -1 level as long as you stay in this hex. And anybody firing at you must be able to have line of sight to that white center dot in order to bring fire with you. If they do, if they can see you, even though you're beached on the side, you'll suffer a -2 hazardous movement penalty, which of course will just ruin your day. So again, here we'd be fired down with a 6 firepower with a -2. The tank would obviously be in the same kind of boat. And again, our concealed units here would not be able to see into this hex because of this plateau effect. In this particular example, we think this is a dummy stack, so when the German movement phase, we're going to enter the hex and beach. So we pay the 1 movement point cost, we beach. We pay the 2 movement factors to get off the boat up here for a total of 3. However, we get pushed back because we realize it's actually another 666 with a heavy. So we're going to get pushed back, and this guy's going to unload on us with their 24 firepower with a -2. Now, when you're in this location, again, like I said, you're basically hugging the riverbanks. You are always going to be subject to the -2 as long as you're in that location. For whatever reason, you leave it. You want to continue your advance. Maybe you want to enter into close combat in the advance phase, assuming you lived. You cannot re-enter that location for the to basically hide. You cannot, not like a gully where you can re-enter it. So once you leave the water hex, then you cannot return to it. And finally, some miscellaneous points. So if you're in shallow water, again, fordable river depth, you become fording infantry, and all that entails. You do not get pinned, etc. There's other rules in fording. Broken and berserk units may not enter a boat, and boat passengers never take morale check or task check. So again, when you're attacked on your boat and you suffer a result that causes one of your boats to go down, you would flip your boat count over to the 2. You would reduce your squad by half, and then you would roll a single die to see what happens to your support weapons and your leader. Pins are always ignored, and if a sniper should attack you, that would break an MMC. So if you roll a 1, it's treated as casualty reduction again, and you do the same things. So again, if you roll a 1 on the sniper, the squad becomes a half squad, and you roll 1 to 3 to save your weapon and 1 to 3 to save your leader. If it's 4 to 6, then they're gone. Finally, in close combat, if you're still in your boat and you're engaged in close combat, you're going to be suffering a +2 die roll modifier when you attack, and they're going to use a -2 on you when they defend. So it makes sense to get off the boat before you start engaging in hand-to-hand, much like skis. The boat itself is not attacked, and it's only destroyed if its passengers are eliminated. And then finally, you're able to capture a boat along with its passengers, although you can reject the prisoners without harming the boat. And there we have boats. So hopefully that was of some use to you. Boats can be scary, as you saw in the A Bridge Too Far clip I showed. Whenever I picture assault boats, that's the scene that's in my head as they're trying to paddle across the way. Here you can see in the background the picture of the German assault boat with the motor and the inherent driver as it's forcing them across the river. So that's enough for me. Next up, we're going to do swimming, which is going to be a short one, I think. Not a lot to cover. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys in that video. Now, if you like the video, or if you have comments because I made a mistake, which is always possible, make sure you write them down in the comments section down below so that I can look at them and then I can decide whether or not I want to redo this video or just pin the comment that points out the mistakes. But that aside, you guys have a great day and we'll see you in the next video.